everybody. Lainey was just giving me the head count. We would have had 15 if actually, I think we do have 15 because a couple of shy ones now just 16 kids today, guys. That's amazing. Yay. So welcome, people who brought your kids. I hope moms, if you have kids here, you get a little break for a minute because it's hard work, you know? Anyway, happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day if you're a biological mom, if you have adopted children, if you are a just surrogate, you have taken in all of the kids because maybe you didn't have children of your own, because we need moms. Apparently people can't hear me, so I'm going to try and talk a little louder. Okay, so it's Mother's Day, and I decided that I wouldn't do I was like, we could do like this powerful message about the women in the Bible, but that would take a really long time because there's so many amazing ones. So I am going to take a minute to brag a little bit about my mom, just because I was lucky enough to have her, and it's Mother's Day. But I promise it'll be relevant, and we are going to be in Genesis 12 today, so if you want to mark that. So Mother's Day. I had the privilege of being raised by an amazing woman and man. My mom was raised in a Catholic home, and so she grew up with faith. She got to go to Catholic school. In high school is where she met my dad. And just a little disclaimer, guys, Catholics are Christians. We all serve the same God. So when I say that she chose to leave the Catholic religion to follow, and she found non-denominational, it's not because it was this terrible thing. It was just, she needed to choose a different path for herself. So that is what my mom did. She was raised in a Catholic home, married in the Catholic Church. Then, when we were young, she felt like she didn't necessarily want us to be raised in the Catholic Church like she was. She wanted to maybe try a different way. But she knew that faith and Jesus, all of that was super important. So she found a church for us. I think I was 4 years old at the time. And my dad was not raised in a Christian home. My dad was actually raised in an abusive home. Parents divorced, physically, verbally abusive, didn't have great role models in his life growing up. And so I know Mother's Day and Father's Day can be really hard if that was your situation growing up. And so just know I see you and I love you and my heart is with you, because it's a hard day. The whole world celebrates and we're like, oh yeah, moms are so great. And sometimes some of us are like, not my mom. So I get it. My dad got it. My dad also chose a different way. So today we're talking about what kind of legacy will you leave? My parents chose a different legacy than what they were raised with. One raised in a great loving home with faith. Another raised in a destructive, dysfunctional home, and they both chose a better path. Because my mom has this influence over my dad, he thought, I better go to church with my wife, because, maybe that'll be helpful for us in the future. So he got involved with, it was Crossroads Christian Church in Tracy. This is where he found Jesus. He was embraced by the men in the church who were able to be positive role models for him, show him what it meant to be a godly, loving father. He was always a loving father, but to invite God into that for real. My mom got involved with the women. She led children's ministry. All of the Christmas programs, my mom helped coordinate all of those embarrassing things that we had to get up on stage and do for all of the people in the congregation. My mom was a part of that. But my dad immediately connected, also started teaching Sunday school, leading youth group, and shout out to all of you from PCF. My parents actually helped plant that church here in town. And so we have this little connection. So we moved to Patterson when I was in 3rd grade, and we continued to drive back and forth from Patterson to Tracy for ministry, for church. My dad, started inviting all of our friends. So my mom My dad would go to Tracy because he works in Livermore, so he would go to Tracy after work. My mom would throw way too many teenagers in a van. Yeah, Andrea knows. And we would go to Tracy for youth group because that's where my dad was, so we could meet with all of those friends. And then we would come home, and we had a tradition every Wednesday night. We would go to Tracy, and then on the way home, we had a couple of football players that loved McDonald's, and so we would have to stop at McDonald's in Wesley because we didn't have McDonald's here. So youth night was also McDonald's and Wesley night, and we would have McDonald's on the way home. Lots of fun. And then eventually PCF got planted, and we got to be a part of that for a little while. My dad was the first youth minister there. He led the youth events connected to the church, but we also had a Bible study at our house where my mom was kind of the Bible study lady. She's always women, children, couples. My mom is like this Bible study guru who would just lead it all, and she'd plan these amazing lessons. So that's what she did for us. So Sunday nights at our house, open to whoever wanted to show up, and we had a lot of random people from the high school that would pile into our front room and sit up the stairs in our house because my mom, that's who my parents were. My dad would go out and play football with them. We could all come in. My mom would have this great lesson prepared for us. And so we got to know, and our friends got to know Jesus through my parents. That is the legacy that they chose to leave for us. It was different from what both of them were raised with, and they both felt God's call in their life to do things a little bit differently than what they knew. And it worked out really well for my sisters and me. And hopefully, that has worked out well for our children because we've gotten to raise them in the church as well. Now, I know that that is not always the case. If you're here and you were not raised in a Christian home, kudos to you because statistically, that is far more difficult to do than someone like me who had the privilege of knowing Jesus my whole life. So well done figuring it out, listening to that voice, and following that prompting in your life because God's going to get you wherever he can connect with you. But as we grow, sometimes we think we know things. And so we shut it out. Maybe we've had bad experiences. We've been hurt, wounded by the church, wounded by people. And so we don't necessarily understand that this loving God exists. So, like I said, I promised this was going to be relevant. Today, we are reading, oh no, my phone. Okay, guys, here's the deal. So last week, I let everyone know that I am resigning from my position here. I actually have an interview tomorrow with the church in Hawaii, so, fingers crossed. But we're using my phone to record this too, so I'm going to just sneak over and grab the Bible because I forgot that I usually read it from my phone. Thank you. I'm just going to borrow Jason's. Well done. Ooh. See, this will look great in my promo video for my interviews. Hey guys, I forgot my Bible. I'm going to just borrow someone else's. Oh my gosh. But you all know this is how I roll, right? So we've come to love this part of me. Okay. If you're new here, don't worry. It's not forever. Okay. So Genesis 12, verse 1. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I will give this land to your descendants." And Abram built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord who had appeared to him. After that, Abram traveled south, set up camp in the hill country with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord, and he worshipped the Lord. Then Abram continued traveling south by stages toward the Negev. God, thank you for these stories. Thank you for your story. Thank you for the lives that got to model just what it looks like to follow you with reckless abandon. Thank you for these words, and I pray that this morning you would speak through me, not my words but yours, and not my will but yours. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. Like I said, I promise this was relevant. So Abram, also later known as Abraham, Father Abraham, if you were raised in the church, Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons said, Father Abraham. Yeah, see, there's always a song, guys. There's always a song. Okay, so Father Abraham, at this time known as Abram, lived in the land of Haran with his father and all of the family. And in that time, it was a patriarchal society where the men carried on the family name, and you didn't leave the family. This was kind of unheard of. You typically would learn the family business. You would continue in your father's footsteps. Your children were considered your father's children, and the name went on and on because that's how you brought honor to your family. You were blessed through your descendants and continuing on the family line. So here's the fun thing about Abram. He obviously chose a different way. He left his family behind, because this God, so he lived in a land with many gods. His father actually worshipped, he was polytheist, so worshipped many gods. And so Abram hears from the one God, decides that he's going to take a monotheistic approach and follow this one God and trust in the promise, even though he had no idea what that meant. He had no idea where he was supposed to go, and all of a sudden he's being told that he's going to have, this legacy of all these descendants, and the descendants are going to be blessed because of him. Now, here, it's easy to just be like, okay, cool, he and his wife and his nephew, and they all went. Well, actually, he left not only trusting that God was going to show him where he was supposed to land. He didn't know where he was going. He also left knowing that his wife was barren, that there was no way this woman could have children that could carry on his name. In chapter 11, we see the genealogy. It talks about Abram and his wife Sarai, and it also says that she was barren, which means because they threw it in there, he knew she was barren when he married her. And he chose to marry her anyway because he is a man of character. She was one of their family. She was somebody who, because of her barrenness and because her own father had passed away, and because people knew that she was barren, she probably would not have been chosen. She would not have been anybody's wife, and she likely would have become an outcast if the family did not care for her. So he chose to let go of his own legacy, to let go of his own desire and his own chance at continuing the family line, having children of his own to carry on his name, to protect her. He chose to care and have compassion for someone who otherwise would have become an outcast. So that is where his story actually started. So with this compassion in his heart, with this wife who apparently is very beautiful also, he sets out on this journey. Now, I don't know about you guys. If you were raised in the church, you hear stories of Father Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. You hear all these amazing names, and they were all these amazing characters. And like I often do, I remind you that they were also human. So this is the thing about Abram. He sets out following a God he doesn't know with a wife who can't have kids. And he's like, I received this promise that I'm going to have these descendants. So the descendants must be coming through somebody else. So I'm going to go ahead and take my nephew with me just in case. Lot, however you say his name. It's written Lot in English. It's pronounced Lut or Lot in the Hebrew. So he goes with them because he thinks, well, maybe, because his father had passed away, so maybe that now I take him under my roof, he becomes one of my own, and my name continues through him. So he sets out with his wife and with his nephew, and they go to this unknown land. Now, when I was talking about my my parents and the legacy that they've left. And when you think about the heroes, I know growing up, hearing these stories, heroes in the Bible, I was always like, oh my gosh, it's like this impossible standard. They were so good, and they always just did everything right, and they heard God's voice, and they just followed without fear. Well, the fact that he took Lot with him says he was a little unsure. He didn't quite understand, and that's okay. He didn't know this God just yet. But he trusted anyway. So again, coming back to my parents. My mom, recently I had a conversation, and there's been this work going on over the last few months. I tend to share a little bit more about how, sometimes the church gets it wrong. Sometimes there's some hurt. Sometimes we got to do things a different way. And I want to make sure that the focus is also on it's okay to get it wrong sometimes. It's okay because it's still good. So this has been I've been, reflecting a lot on my own parents in these last few months. So I shared last week that recently a friend of ours from high school, someone who attended the Bible studies and came to church with us, he passed away. And a few days before he died, his girlfriend, they were sitting in the hospital, and she decided to start asking him questions. What are some of the things, just the things that she never thought to ask him before. But one of those questions was, what is your favorite vacation memory? And he said, Pinecrest with the Foremans. He has not been to Pinecrest with the Foremans since, I think, 1998. He had a lot of life experience, a lot of other vacations in that time. He was somebody that we just always loved, that I think he just never really understood how loved he was. But we always knew that he also loved us. So time and distance didn't really matter. We just had this love for him. So to hear that here at the end of his life, one of his favorite memories included our family, I was just like, of course it did. Not because of me and my sisters, but because of my parents, because of who my parents were, because of the way they opened the doors, they invited everybody in. We had friends and family members live with us for a few days, for months, for years at a time, in and out for my entire life. The door was always open, and there was always food, and there was always love, and everybody was always welcome. So I'm sharing this with my mom recently. I was like, oh my gosh, it meant so much. And he said this, and she was like, I don't understand. So she proceeds to tell me all the ways she thought she got it wrong over the years. She can look back on all that time and see all the ways she may have failed. She may have let the kids down. She might not have been there enough for us, instead of recognizing what God was really doing. And I think too often we miss that. The same when we read these stories. We read and we talk about the heroics. We talk about this great faith. And we think it's this impossible standard, and that God's calling us to this life of perfection, that we just have to do everything right all the time. But that's not the case, right? We look back on our childhood. We look back on our time with friends, Pinecrest, getting to take our friends camping. And we have all these joyful memories. And sure, we were teenagers, and yes, mom and dad were super annoying when we were teenagers. But we grew up, and then now, more times than not, we're like, oh yeah, remember when mom did that, and now we just did it, and she maybe was right. We have to tell her that all the time. You were actually right about this. So I'm just, sometimes we need to spend more or less time putting all this pressure on ourselves, more time recognizing that God's at work even in the midst of our failures. If we continue reading in Genesis 12, the next part talks about one of Abram's first little moments with being fearful and maybe not showing up in this faithful, reckless, abandoned, trust in God kind of way. They make their way to Egypt. He knows his wife is hot, and he's like, they're going to kill me because they're going to want you, so we're going to just tell them that you're my sister. It wasn't technically a lie because she was already related. Plus, when you bring someone into the father's patriarchy, into the family, they're all known as brothers and sisters. So they weren't lying. She really was his sister. However, the Egyptians have eyes. They also, are not stupid. And they're watching the interaction of this man and his sister. And they were like, I don't know if this is actually your sister. And so, after, they lied, this is a sister, Pharaoh takes her and wants her as his own wife. Then they see this interaction and they're like, this is not okay. You're going to bring curses onto us. Why did you do that? Why did you lie? And then he has to admit, I was afraid and I didn't know and I thought maybe you were going to kill me. And so they're like, okay, be on your way. He does this more than once, guys. He did not learn his lesson the first time. He did it again. Along the way, if you really pay attention to Abram's story, this is what happens. Amazing faith, following God, trusting the story, and then kind of big failures. Not failures, obviously, God still used it. But he does this later in the story because he actually had to, so he took Lot. Lot was going to be the one that continued the family line, the legacy here. But Lot actually needed to go a different way, and Abram let him go. Abram trusted God enough to say, okay, if Lot is not the one that's going to carry on my family name, I'm going to trust that God's going to provide. And so a couple of times, Lot left, and then he had to rescue him, and he came back, and then he released him again and just said, all right, God, full trust in you. So full trust in God. Now they don't have Lot, so what do? Oh, well, Sarah, her name gets changed to Sarah, she has this servant. Maybe if we use the servant, then you can have a baby with her, and that's how your line is going to continue, which also wasn't part of God's plan. He worked with it, he used it anyway, but that was not the intention. The intention was, please just trust me because I'm the God of the impossible, and I'm going to show you who I am, and it's not going to happen today, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but pretty soon it's going to happen if you just keep trusting me. And that is what happened. Later on, when Abraham, his name had been changed, was 99 years old, Sarah, who was barren, was told that she would conceive, and she did. And when Abraham was 100 years old, Isaac was born, and his line got to continue through Isaac. Ishmael, his firstborn with Hagar, was also able to carry on his line. But they had to trust the story. They had to be willing to release and surrender everything. And I'm sure there were moments along the way when they looked back before Isaac came along and they were like, oh, no wonder we haven't had anyone because, we've failed so many times. We got this wrong so many times. Now maybe we're being punished. Maybe the promise isn't going to happen through us. And yet, God just said, just wait a little longer. Just trust me. I'm not going to tell you how, but it's coming. So that was what I got to share with my mom too. It doesn't matter if you can look back and see all the ways that you failed us, because look at what happened. On his deathbed, Kenny remembered you. Kenny has this fondness in his heart because of the way that you loved him, and he's not the only one. Because so many times I bump into people in town and they tell me, oh yeah, I remember when I needed a place to stay and your parents let me come stay at the house. I remember when I didn't want to have anything to do with church and I came to your parents' Bible study. I remember your parents, the way your dad would play football, the way your mom always had candy and soda for us when we were teenagers. The love. They don't look at this and go, oh my gosh, look at all their failures. No, they remember the love because God didn't ever call us to be perfect, didn't ever ask us to reach an impossible standard. God just said, just trust that I am the God of the impossible, and I can use you, flaws and all. One of the fun things about my own story, and as I, again, have been reflecting, and especially now knowing that I'm going to have to say goodbye to this place, trusting the story, seeing God at work in the midst of all of it. I know I shared a little bit before. When I got divorced, my husband's family came here. He was raised in this space. So for this to be the place that God was like, I'm going to have you come here while your husband's family is still here. And I'm going to bring healing and redemption to that story here. You're going to be loved by these people, and you're going to love them, and there's going to be so much grace and so much forgiveness, and everyone's going to be okay. And PCF. PCF is a part of my story, one of the painful parts of my story. Early on, when we were young, there was a moment when we and our friends were sort of pushed out by the church. And we were really hurt, and we didn't know what we were going to do. But my parents protected us, and they said, that's okay. We don't have to go back. The next Sunday, we didn't go to church, but we opened our home, and all the kids came to our house, and we had church at home. And eventually, we found another church where we could all attend with all of our friends. So it was really funny to me, because this is how God works, right? When we're going to bring Caesar to the gathering, Caesar from PCF, and we're going to combine services, and we're going to combine our families, right? Because PCF and the gathering, of course, let's all be together because we love Jesus and we love each other, and because it's not about the failures. It's not about those moments. We all get it wrong sometimes. The gathering, formerly Patterson Covenant Church, has gotten it wrong sometimes. PCF, early on, has gotten it wrong sometimes. Each of us in our own lives has gotten it wrong sometimes, and God is still at work even in our failures, bringing redemption, bringing peace, bringing forgiveness, combining families, because it's not about our church and their church and what we believe. We all serve the same God. God brings healing when we are faithful and we trust the story and we trust the process. And that is what God did for me in this space, for my family, and for our history, because of this legacy that my parents started telling us to trust the story, to trust Jesus with it. Getting to come here and watch this story continue to unravel. God has big things for us. Each of us, individually and collectively, but we have to choose. What kind of legacy are we gonna leave? Are we gonna get hung up on our will, our way, the things we've always known, doing it the way that feels comfortable because that's the way we've always done it, right? Whether that's individually or collectively. Are we gonna argue about the things like the budget that really doesn't matter, you know? Or are we going to trust God with our story? Look how many people are here today. Look how many new faces we have just in the last couple of months. God is still working in this place. God still has a legacy to continue through the gathering, through PCF, through each of us individually, but we just have to choose to say, I'm going to follow it. I'm going to get it wrong sometimes, and there's grace for that, but I'm going to trust it. I'm going to do my best. And when I'm afraid, those are the times that we really press into Jesus. Those are the times when we can trust that God has us. My kids and I, we're leaving. We're going to put our house on the market. I don't really know where we're going. Like I said, I have this interview coming up. And I would love, Hawaii, and then you can all come visit. Free vacation, right? But we don't know. But we're trusting the process. We're going to trust the story, and we know that God's not going to fail us. That wherever we're going next is going to be really good. And if we get afraid, and if we dig our heels in and we're like, no, we don't want to leave Patterson, what are we going to miss out on? You know, and the same is true here. If we get afraid, if we dig our heels in, this is the way we've always done it, and there's been too much change, and I don't like change, what are we going to miss out on? So can we leave a legacy together, individually and collectively, a legacy of trust, a legacy of faith, a legacy of turning to each other in healthy ways and turning to Jesus when we feel afraid, looking back. Even the patriarchs of our faith got it wrong sometimes, and knowing that that's okay. All we have to do is show up. All we have to do is just have a willing heart. So this morning, we're going to take a few minutes to just reflect on the things that maybe God is calling us into, that maybe we've been a little resistant to, or maybe we just have no idea and we just want to be open. And we're going to remember that in all things, Even when we can't see it, even when we can't feel it, God is at work, redeeming, resurrecting, forgiving, letting his grace flow through each of us. We just have to be willing to receive. So that's what I have for you this morning. Let's take a few minutes to reflect on what we're hearing and think about what we might want to do with what we've heard.